Hello, and welcome to Timing is Everything, a program of Care Dimensions. My name is Mary Crowe, Director of Professional and Community Education at Care Dimensions. And I'm so excited today. We're in March, and March is National Social Work Month, and which is a fabulous thing. Being a social worker myself, I take additional pride in it, but I'm already proud of all the social workers out there and very excited about this. And the theme to Social Work Month this year is the time is right for social work. I believe the time has always been right for social work. It's such a critical piece, and we are so lucky today because we have Kelli Ann Sullivan here with us today, and she is just an amazing social worker. So Kelli, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mary. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited.
We're so happy to have you on. So Kelli, tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I have been a social worker we were just talking about this before we started, Mary and I, about how time goes by fast. I've been a social worker for 25 years. You want me to tell you how I started out and everything?
Please.
Yeah. So started out working. I interned at DCF, and my original plan in social work. Social work's such a great degree because there's so many different populations to work with and so many different opportunities. And I had a lot of kids, and I had 4 kids, and so I assumed I would want to work with kids. And it turned out I was working in an outpatient clinic up in Gloucester, and I was seeing kids, I was seeing families, doing family work, and I had a client there who I was seeing for addiction, and he came to me one week and had a terminal illness. He was about 60 years old, and I followed him. I followed him until the end of his life. I saw him in the clinic. And then I saw him at home, and then I walked with him through the hospice, the whole, getting the admission and coordinating that. And I fell in love with that work. I loved all the life review and the family work and being in his home with him. And I was hooked. Yeah. And so I started at Care Dimensions about 12 years ago, I think, per diem, and then full time within a couple months, full time. And I've been here at Care Dimensions in all different capacities. I've worked in the home care side. I've worked in the the long-term care side, and now I'm in the assisted care team. And so I'm in all assisted livings now. Yeah.
That is awesome. So that was really a turning point for you, though, because, isn't it interesting? I hear a lot of people will come in and even nurses and other disciplines, and they'll say, I want to work with children. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I'll say, have you ever even, kind of taken time or even, had any experience at all in this area, right? With end of life being such a precious time. And I think people kind of shy away from it because, they're unaware. They don't know. And they get afraid of kind of thinking, oh my gosh, I'd never want to do that. But here you have one situation, one human being that you had this experience with, and it was life altering.
Yes. And the other surprise was once I started with hospice work, I assumed everybody in hospice work was going to be just like this gentleman. It was going to be all cancer. It was going to be all, younger people. And then I, quickly learned that it's a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's that we take care of, and a lot of elders, of course, and I fell completely in love with geriatrics. I love elders. I just can't, I love being an advocate in elderly care. I love life review. Nothing beats hanging out with the 95-year-olds talking about, World War II and the Depression, and just getting all that wisdom and perspective. I feel super lucky.
Yeah. So I want to pick up a couple of different points. So there's so many things you're saying that I'm dying to kind of expound upon, because, you're talking about, and it's really a common misconception, Kelli, isn't it? That people think they associate hospice as cancer, and really it's not. It's a multitude. It really has to do with people anybody who has an advanced illness or a terminal illness. And it's not a specific to cancer, but oftentimes people think hospice is just for that, but it's really any illness that brings you to that point. So that's one thing I always like to clear up. the other thing is that people do think that hospice is really just for older people. And as you're talking, even though you made the switch from children to, there's a specialty too within hospice, because we do care for anybody from a breath old to I think our oldest person was 111 or 110, right? So you can see the range. So age is not a respecter. I mean, death is not a respecter of age. And again, all people this can affect. So you just happen not to be in the pediatric specialty, but that's here. We have that.
Sure. Right. Well, and the other important thing that I feel like, being out in the world, talking to families so much, that's such a big misconception that always is a pet peeve of mine, is that, people wait until the very last couple of days, the very last couple of weeks of life. And we have so much to offer, so much to offer people. And, if you have an illness, and you've decided that you're not going to pursue curative measures, you just want to be at home enjoying your life and get your care in the home, we can offer that. We have so much to offer. And I feel like those families that come in, on the earlier side, really benefit at the end of life, from our services and support and the relationships.
Absolutely. And that's an important piece too, because you say, and it is home, right? Because sometimes people think, they have to go on hospice, they have to go somewhere. Well, hospice is anywhere you call home, right? So just, any setting. So whether it be their private home or skilled nursing facility or assisted living or group home or you name, or one of the inpatient hospice facilities, right, Kelly? I mean, it can really happen anywhere. Yes. But I do like that you're bringing up too, people they feel like they wait until the person is actively dying. And there's so much and I'm going to talk about some of these things with you that you're bringing up about life review and that sort of thing. There's a lot to do at this precious time that we call end of life, and the sooner the better, right? Yeah. Do you, and I'm sure again, from my perspective, one of the things I love about hospice is it doesn't medicalize, right? The situation. It takes the whole person into account, spirit, mind, and body. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that when we were talking about this interview, one of the things I love the most about Care Dimensions, and I think this is in all hospice, really, all hospice programs, but is the interdisciplinary team. So, we treat people physically, obviously, the first thing we ask when we go in is how somebody's feeling physically. We want to make sure people are comfortable and pain-free. And then I'm asking about how's your spirit, how are you feeling, how, emotionally, and talk through kinds of, the mental part of it, Right. And then of course our chaplains are dealing with the spiritual side of it, which is a really important side of it. I feel like we have, I don't know if you've had Sharon Dunbar-Link on here, but, she's one of our longtime chaplains, and she always says something like, we're having a spiritual experience in a physical body, and so, we work as a team and we kind of deal with all of those things. It's just a wonderful program, as far as the team working together, and we have the aid, and then of course we have the music therapists and, the volunteers that are so wonderful too. And we all come together and we treat people holistically in that way.
Yeah. And that's the whole purpose, right? And we have had Sharon on, by the way, because it's so important that people understand this interdisciplinary team approach, and you guys talk, right? It's really about making sure, again, addressing the whole human being, because if you're not tending to that person's spirit, mind, and body, we're doing a disservice. So you're really tending to that, and there's a lot of great communication. Right.
Yeah. We meet together formally every other week as a team, but we see each other out in the field all the time. I mean, COVID made things a little more challenging, but we quickly set up Zoom meetings and we call each other all the time. I mean, my closest friends in life have turned out to be the nurses I work with. I'm still very close with nurses I've worked with, years ago that aren't still with us, or they're on a different team, because we do joint visits. A lot of times people will let the nurse in, but they're like a little confused about what the social worker does, and so I might come along with the nurse, and we form relationships that way. And then we also support each other. I mean, I feel like as a social work team, we talk about this a lot in social work meetings about how part of our role is also to support our team, emotionally, because it's a tough job. Yeah.
Yeah, and things did not, and like you say, things didn't stop during COVID. The care never was interrupted. It continued right on through. So, the first commitment through our organization is always to the people that we care for and the families,
Yeah.
and that's and part of that too is, like you say, supporting one another.
Yeah.
Because one of the ways you continue to do this work is by tending to the people that are providing it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's such a nice organization to work for. I mean, a lot of times when I'm telling people, I talk to families about one of the things that we do as social workers is talk about, possibly if there's going to need to be a move or if they're looking at facilities, which happens sometimes, not all the time. I tell people to look around you at the staff and are they happy there? Look around at the aides. Are they happy there? Because that tells you a lot about an organization. And I feel like in our organization, I mean, you look around at our staff, we're generally a happy bunch. We support each other. And I mean, I'm really proud to work for Care Dimensions for that reason.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Oh, I
yeah.
agree. I agree. So let's also, I want you to explain to people, because I think, like you said earlier, a lot of times people know what the nurse does. They don't know what the social worker does. So can you get into some of that nitty gritty about exactly what is it? What is
Yeah.
it that social work
What
provides?
is it, Mary? It's a very tough thing to talk about, well, or to explain, because nurses come with their stethoscopes, and their bags. They've got lots of tools they get to use. Sometimes I have a stethoscope envy, because we're coming with just ourselves, our voices, and it's a lot of it is about the relationship. There's a lot of practical things that we do as a social work team. I mean, we're kind of generally in charge of facility and family meetings. One of the things that came out of the pandemic, I was just talking with a family before this about setting up a family meeting, and they're all out of town. But because of the pandemic, now very quickly Care Dimensions set up this Zoom platform, and I can have these family meetings where someone's in California, another person's in North Carolina, and we're talking about the patient, how they're doing, and planning, getting things kind of organized. As a culture, we don't talk a lot about end of life. So I feel like that's one of my roles as a social worker. I'm going in and I'm talking about difficult conversations, difficult things to talk about, and getting things organized with families, talking about advanced directives, talking about funeral planning. A lot of that falls on us. And emotionally supporting families. I mean, during COVID, one of the things that happened is all the families in the assisted living and the long-term care settings, a lot of the families couldn't go see their loved ones. So they were having these visits through the window. They were like yelling up to their loved one. It was just so sad. And we were still, for the most part, able to go in. We had all the gear and everything. But I would call families and I would say, listen, I saw your mom today and she looked okay. And we had a nice visit. And they were so relieved to have some more eyes on their loved one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do so many weird things. We
Well,
got, behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of social work, like you said, is that we do a lot. There's a lot of different things. And again, so it's not just one, and some, there is the emotional support, the psychosocial and all of that. But a lot of the other things too is really beneficial, and you're actually still doing that psychosocial support is through some of the concrete things that you're bringing up about tending to resources and other things, and that really helps somebody. How do you focus on your loved ones dying when you're worried about finances, when you're worrying about additional services? And social workers, that's where they step in.
Yeah, yeah. And we're advocates for our patients too. We were talking about kind of different situations that I've been in the last 12 years. And one of my favorite examples was this lovely lady I had at the very beginning of my career with Care Dimensions. And I still remember her very fondly. And she was a woman who was alert and oriented. She was an elderly woman. She was very adamant about making her own decisions. And her situation was not the best. She didn't have a lot of money. She didn't have a lot of space, and she was limited in her capacity. And what I did with her was I worked with the family because the family was really worried. They wanted her to go to the nursing home, so we did a lot of work around that, a lot of education, and I helped them build a community network. It was like that we had people coming from senior care, and we had people coming from like some volunteer organizations. The mailman checked in on her when he
Oh,
would deliver the
wow.
mail. You know what I mean? Like that's the moment.
Yes.
It was just like everything was outside of the box. And this lady, she got to stay in her home until the end of life.
Wow.
And
I
it
mean,
was
talk about
really,
rallying the troops and wow, see what I mean about community?
yeah,
I'm going to tell you, isn't that amazing? And
yeah,
these situations do happen all the time, and I don't think people are aware of it.
yeah.
Just how much people do step up.
And they want to, a
They
lot of times
do.
people want to. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So tell us, I wanted to just, we're going to go in. I want to ask you about a couple of other scenarios, Kelly. But before you do that, I want to go back to your comment about life review, all of that. It is so important. Like again, so sometimes people think, oh, end of life, the person takes to the bed, waits for the medical event. No, 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 no. This is right, because that's what I love about hospice too. It's not about dying. The focus isn't around dying. It's around living
Yes.
fully for as much time as that person has left. So talk about life review and how important that is.
Yeah. Well, you know what? A lot of times, especially with the elders, I mean, of course, with younger people too, but I feel like particularly with the elders in our community, they don't have a lot of opportunities to share their stories, and I don't know. It's actually kind of sad. So I feel like, one of the things I love the most is hearing about, our patients' life stories, and it's in the act of reviewing their kind of purpose in life, and kind of looking at it through a different lens and holding the space while they talk about, fun things that they did. I mean, I've heard some unbelievable stories. I mean, again, how lucky am I get to hear these amazing stories, but also, I've had vets work through trauma with me. That comes up for social workers, chaplains too, a lot at end of life. A gentleman that maybe never talked about his service, and then was having nightmares, was having a hard time sleeping, and so processing that can be really helpful. And help, and also lead to a peaceful end of life, right? If you're processing all of that. And then, the other thing is, we laugh a lot. I've had so many patients tell me just the funnest stories, and, real belly laughs about different family events and different things. I just had a family do a surprise party for their loved one, a big 90th. And, it's just fun to talk about that and look through pictures today with her. And, yeah, I mean, life review is so important. You really want to look back at your life and kind of reflect on it at this time. And a
Absolutely.
lot of families don't, and this is the other thing, Mary, it's hard for families to do it, right? It's hard to talk about because you get emotional with your mom. But I mean, as a team, like we as social workers, we can hold that space.
Yes, yeah. And how wonderful is that too, when you can have even the family there and being a facilitator in that way, helping them, because those stories, it's going to matter to them, right? And that's
Yeah.
going to help their bereavement too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So that stuff really matters. People want to tell their stories. They need to know that their life had significance and meaning. And I think this is such a critical part of what social workers and other staff do for people at this stage of life.
Yeah.
And like you say, I think a lot of times people look at life review and they think, oh, it's really just kind of, it's about certainly celebrating all of the things that went well, but it's also reworking sometimes the things, as you mentioned, that don't go well. And coming to terms with that. And it can really matter for people in their dying process.
And I have had experiences, not all the time, sometimes people expect that they're going to have a big remarkable amends or a family strife get mended. That doesn't always happen, but I have had that happen. I have had that, the mother say, it's okay if you call my daughter and tell her, finally, after years of not talking to them. And I have had those moments, which, oh my gosh, again, like so wonderful to be witness to, a moment like that. And then working at acceptance if it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might not bring that stethoscope in, but boy, your presence is so powerful. right? Power than
Yeah.
any stethoscope. It's so important, and that's the thing I think is that, having that presence. And I know when I was doing direct work, that was so important to people around having that, the power of presence.
Yeah.
And really how that mattered. They couldn't even put it into words sometimes, but that's just being able to be present with somebody and to embrace really some of the things that they were experiencing was beyond words.
Yeah.
So tell us some more stories, Kelly. Give us some other scenarios.
Yeah. So my favorite story, and I do take interns. I usually have an intern with me throughout the year. And so this is always my favorite one to talk to them about. But I had years ago, I had a patient that, really didn't want to talk to me about end of life. He was doing pretty well. He did come on service with us relatively early on. And so he was really focused on just, on getting out, doing his life, and didn't want to talk to me about advanced directives, didn't want to talk about medical equipment, anything like that. And I just would go every week, and I would build a relationship with him. And he was a chef, so he would give me a recipe. I would have to make the recipe, and then I would have to report back. And we had a wonderful relationship. I mean, the nurse too. The whole team had a really good relationship with him and his family. And when he did when he did start to transition and really was starting to get sick, it was dramatic and it was fast, which is not always like that, And because of all that work, I mean, this was like 2 years of work. He had trusted all of us. He trusted me. When I was telling him we need to get you a hospital bed and let's get you some oxygen in here, it was like, yes, of course. Like Kelly said, so let's do it. And the relationship I had with his wife, when he passed away, I would go, I visited her a couple times to do some bereavement work, and it was, really about that relationship, which sometimes can look like nothing, right? We're just talking about recipes and the Red Sox, but it really made a difference.
Well, you're meeting him where he's at, and that was important to him. So, I mean, and there's that, again, knowing his story, understanding his story and tuning into that.
Yeah.
So what may seem superficial, that was something that was such a huge piece of his life that you were paying attention to.
Yeah.
That's really neat. What a great story. And, and that's the thing too, when you were talking about sometimes people wait and then it becomes more crisis intervention.
Yeah.
And, so this is some of the benefits too, again, of getting on early.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to work through some of this and to develop that rapport, all of those things.
Yeah. And trust somebody, trust us,
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. How about some other scenarios you have?
Oh, well, the other one I was thinking of when we were talking, it's actually about one of our doctors. But I mean, it's about social work, but we had a doctor, Mary, you remember, Dr. Warren, and I worked really closely with him. So as a team, again, this is a team approach. I had a patient, a really complicated case. It was a really complicated, psychosocial wise. There was financial issues, there was drug dependency issues, there was family dynamic, it had everything. And it was really complicated, and it was a bad situation. And she was really eligible for the Kaplan House. And so, with the Kaplan, I'm sure you do shows on eligibility for Kaplan, but, you have to really be in some like a pain crisis or have some issues medically. And so I called Dr. Warren, and he came suit and tie into this situation that was really complex and not the cleanest. It was really not the best situation. And we sat with her in our bed, kind of talking with her, reassuring her. We got her to Kaplan, and it was such a better scenario. They were able to support the family. And I feel like that's a good example, because it talks about social work, but it also talks about the team approach.
Yes.
I loved working with Dr. Warren. He was a really great, doctor to work with.
Yeah. And that is the thing, is that, and again, part of that interdisciplinary is that it needs to flow well. And that's the beauty of working all together, because you are meeting the person's needs in every aspect. Yeah. And so you're not doing this alone. You're not kind of addressing this. You're really pulling everybody in to meet the needs of everybody involved.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Yeah. I'll tell you, it's so neat to hear. And again, it's just so important. And I love doing this show with you because I really, sometimes people have they just don't understand, like, what is the role? And a lot of times, it's funny that you had mentioned DCF, Child and Family Services initially, because I think people hear social worker and they automatically think all social workers are, and listen, it's an organization that's so needed, but they think that all social workers, that's the only type. They don't realize that there's medical social work and other areas that people are functioning in, and what some of the roles and what some of the things that they can do. So
Yeah.
it's nice so that people have a better understanding of how exactly the social worker works within the setting.
Yeah, I know, it's true. And, again, it's a lot about advocacy, right? I feel like a lot of my job is about really, cheerleading. I remember I had a professor at Salem State that used to tell us, statistically, I never was a cheerleader, Mary, but statistically, I guess there are a lot of social workers that were. And it feels like that, like a real, getting somebody behind you to really speak for you. How many times do we hear, like, an elder or sick, any age, someone who's sick say, I went to the doctors and the doctor looked at my healthcare proxy, looked at my adult daughter and talked to them, didn't talk to me, and I feel like I love that part of social work. That's one of our goals, right, as social workers.
Yeah, advocacy is a huge component of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Kelli, I know we just have a little bit of time left. Just any last gems that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, just, again, like we talked about earlier, Care Dimensions is a nonprofit organization. It's such a good organization to work for, really cares about its employees and its families and patients. And, I feel like, the culturally, it is hard to talk about end of life. It's hard to talk about chronic illness. And so, if you had any questions about it, you could just call, and talk to our staff. And, sometimes we just do educational visits and try to, just provide education about what we do. There's a lot here to offer. And yeah, it's a good program.
Well, thank you so much, Kelli. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's been wonderful to talk with you like this. And we really appreciate the generosity of your time and all that you do here. And also, happy Social Work Month. And
Thanks,
again,
Mary, you too.
thank you. Just so proud to be a fellow social worker and colleague. And thanks for everything that you do.
Thanks, Mary.
I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's show. I hope that you found this helpful and informative, and we look forward to having you at our other programs. My name is Mary Crowe, and this has done Timing with Everything with Care Dimensions.
Home. More than ever, it's your sanctuary. But if you're caring for a loved one with advanced illness, it can feel isolating and worrisome. Care Dimensions can help. As Massachusetts' leading hospice provider, you can count on us for guidance, medical care, and support. We follow all COVID-19 safety precautions to protect you and your family, so you don't have to delay getting the care you need. Visit Care Dimensions online or give us a call.